All throughout high school and middle school, I had this group of friends, and we quickly became known as the class clowns. And I remember, I believe it was our sophomore year, one unfortunate teacher got all three of us in the same class. And I believe she was the only one that got all three of us in the same class. And I remember one morning, it was the first class of the day, and we were really into the paper footballs, and we were throwing them all over the place. And the teacher came in and scolded one of my friends and said, "Do not throw that across the room." And he replied back, "I didn't throw it, I dropped it with range." And that reminds me of a great book that I just read titled Range by David Epstein, with the subtitle being Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And in this video, I want to share with you the 4 main points that I found super valuable in the book and hopefully convince you that it's worth reading. The first major point that I wanted to talk about from Range is the concept or idea around a learning environment. So David talks about 2 different types of learning environments in Range, and the first one is the one that we're most familiar with, which is the kind learning environment. It's what you think about when you think of tiger moms, so to speak, is what he calls it in the book, or what he discusses in the book, where you have a child and you want to practice piano, or you want them to become a professional athlete. These environments are very kind in the sense that you know the rules and the conditions, and you can kind of predict success in a way based on the level of effort that you kind of put in there. And the way that people achieve mastery in these fields, in these kind learning environments, is that they learn the rules and the patterns so well that they can instinctually identify and make decisions based on their instincts. Now, that is the polar opposite of the other type of learning environment, which is a wicked learning environment. So one of the main major differences between the kind and the wicked learning environments is the complexity. So in the kind ones, the complexity is relatively low, but in the wicked ones, the complexity is very high. And when you have high complexity, predictability is very difficult. And that experience through intuition is less reliable because conditions are constantly changing. You can't use or rely on that to be predictive of the future path to success and those different things. And so you need a different tool set for wicked learning environments. And the main argument in Range is that being a generalist and having knowledge across several different domains, even if they're kind of inside the same bucket, will make you, will better prepare you for engaging in wicked learning environments. A good example of this from a different book that I've just currently finished called Meltdown is around SWAT teams. So SWAT teams, even though that you're not supposed to be, or maybe you're not going to be a sniper, you need to know how to use that tool. And in learning that tool, you understand how to think like a sniper, and it increases your range of that team and makes you a little bit more elastic in the role, so that way you can adapt, that SWAT team can adapt to the situation as it unfolds. And that kind of leads to David's next point, which is specialization does have some limitations. We think that specialization is kind of the end-all be-all. It's how you're going to get the 6-figure paycheck. It's how you're going to, get the title that you want. And that is kind of the lure of it, because a lot of our educational institutions, most of them, all of them really, are really geared towards specializing you into a particular field. Becoming too hyper-specialized, is what David argues in the book, creates what's called cognitive entrenchment. And so cognitive entrenchment means that the specialist will have a much more difficult time than the novices in adjusting to new rules and different environments, which would be the wicked environment. So as the complexity increases across all disciplines, you're seeing that there is an increasing demand for generalized knowledge. And in technology, or in tech, we typically refer to this as the T-shaped knowledge. So we have this kind of a broad understanding of technology as a whole, maybe the application development stack, all the way to help desk or running the software, the sysadmin. And then we have these pillars of deep expertise in the middle that allow us to have a broader set. My time as an SRE was probably the best example of that, where each person on the team had a particular set of responsibilities that they were really good at. One might be monitoring, one might be infrastructure as code, and another one might be kind of databases. And that's their deep expertise, but they also had the broad knowledge of being able to debug the application and being able to use the monitoring service. And so we were cross-trained to a degree, even though each one of us had a specialty. And that is really the argument. And the way around getting out of that cognitive entrenchment of a specialist is to build this T-shaped knowledge. And this is really in demand. And it's in demand because creativity has never been more important, because computers are taking over more and more of the jobs and operations and tasks that humans used to do, specifically in the realm of repetitive work, with inside kind learning environments. So if you remember back to 1997, I believe, when Deep Blue beat the first chess grandmaster, the computers continually are going to continue to do that. We'll have self-driving cars and so forth. And the point that David makes in Range when he talks about chess is that there is a little bit of hope with it. It's not that computers are going to take over the world. It's that they're going to augment the human mind in ways that we haven't yet been able to foresee. One of those was he kind of encapsulated in the idea or sharing the stories around freestyle chess. So in freestyle chess, you work in teams, teamed with computers and players. And what was discovered in that is that the human players started to think more about the broad strategy, the things that the computer could not computate, but then it also at the same time gave the human player a huge advantage because it didn't take them the decades to learn all the fine-grained rules and bring those into instinct. They could offload all that just much like you would the calculations, math calculations for algebra to a calculator. You could now do that, and you could offload all of that, the tactical knowledge that you need to acquire for chess, to the computer and purely focus on the strategy, thinking up at a higher level than the computer for that game. And so there's going to be continual opportunities as we move forward to exercise that level of creativity. And to gain that creativity, you need to have a broader set of knowledge that works across many different domains. And that's really kind of our greatest strength, is our ability to integrate broadly across several domains of knowledge and then aggregate that knowledge into a solution. So to recap, the first main point that I took away was the idea of a learning environment, again, the kind versus the wicked learning environments, and the limitations and strengths of the people that operate in those. And then the next part was the realization that specialization itself does have limitations, and that there's extreme and intrinsic value in having a general knowledge and developing that T-shaped knowledge, which then dovetailed into the third main point, which is that T-shaped knowledge is in demand and is a highly valuable skill, even though it is difficult to articulate general knowledge that's kind of accumulated into something that becomes more specialized, that what Naval Ravikant calls specific knowledge. It's more difficult to articulate, but it's much more valuable. And then that finally led to kind of the action part of the book, where David Epstein basically calls for you to develop your own range. You know, he spent the first part of the book kind of laying out the argument that you should care about broadening your skill sets, the benefits of it, and that the highest performers are actually those people that seem like they're specialists, but they're actually really great generalists, and that they've developed that T-shaped knowledge again. So he has some suggestions that you can follow for finding or developing your range. And the first idea that I really loved in the book on this idea of developing range was around match quality. So match quality describes the degree of overlap between who you are and what you do. So if you're familiar with if you're familiar with James Clear's work in Atomic Habits, he says that the best way to establish habits is to tie it to your identity, and this dovetails perfectly into that. It connects to it perfectly. And so match quality, again, is how much overlap there is between what you do, how interested you are, and the work that you do. And so it's basically a barometer of interest and how engaged you are in your work. And if you're more engaged in your work, you're obviously going to perform higher, and you're going to put more into it, and you're going to get better. The next part the next point that I really liked in trying to find match quality is to go through what David calls a sample period. So a sample period is a given time box of lightly structured lessons that have a variety of learnings in a similar or same domain. So if you were going to pick up music, you would probably sample several different instruments. If you're going to pick up a programming language, you might try out a couple, just spending 20 hours here, 20 hours there, enough to kind of get competent and your kind of head around the language, so to speak, to find what kind of use cases it was. A lot of it this time is just spent towards exploratory learning, where you're just kind of testing everything out, and you give yourself that time to explore. He uses a lot of examples with young children that were given this opportunity that then somehow stumbled into becoming an Olympic athlete or a world-class performer. And so what's followed, though, is if you stick in the sample period, you're never going to get anywhere. You're going to have a lot of general knowledge, but you're never going to dive deep into one. You're never going to get into the T part of the T-shaped knowledge. And so the latter part of the sample period is followed by periods of narrowing focus and increased structure and increased training volume or practice volume. So as you sample, you're kind of maybe spending a half hour or 10 minutes a day or something like that across many different things. And then eventually you get to the point where you're diving full on into a deliberate practice of it. So you're coding a specific language for an hour or more a day. You're playing guitar for an hour more a day in classical or in whatever genre that you want to be practiced. And again, that's continually narrowing your focus after you find something in your sample period that has a high match quality. And so you're constantly pivoting towards higher and higher match quality, and you're also narrowing your focus in the structure with the lesson to refine the skill. As David is explaining match quality in a sample period, he also throws in the quote that psychologists call this particular approach to learning new skills and finding your career path to be the most common path to success. The last little thing that I want to leave you with is this redefinition of an amateur. So as you go through the sample period, the first friction point that you're going to have is that this is a waste of time and that I shouldn't be engaging in any of these things. I should just stick with my specialty. I'm already competent in there. I can refine my skills. But know that there's a diminishing law of return. The law of diminishing returns applies to your specialty, because once you get to a certain point, you actually are going to have better returns on investing in new things. But what's going to keep you from doing that is not wanting to be an amateur. And I want to offer this new definition, or the original definition rather, of an amateur. So an amateur originally meant someone who adores an endeavor and nothing more. Today, it's more of a slanderous term to be called an amateur. You know, what I always think of is Ron Burgundy going, "Oh, you know, what is this, amateur hour?" But you should give yourself the permission to spend time pursuing activities purely based on your interest in them, so that way you can kind of stumble your way through and find a better match quality. There's this parable that I absolutely love from Tinkered Thinker, who's a pseudonymous Twitter account, and he does have a blog, but the blog title, or this parable's title, is called The Hound and the Hawk. And he's using these two creatures to demonstrate how they find their way to their destination. So the hawk gets to fly high above and gets to basically see every single thing, what he calls a sniper's paradise. And so the hawk is able to see through the vantage point of the sky all the different obstacles and so forth. But he does have one hindrance, which is he needs to know where he's going to end up. He needs to know the destination ahead of time. Otherwise, he's not going to make it there with all the advantage of the precision of sitting up high above. And when we think about our careers, it's very unlikely that we will know precisely the destination that we want to go. At best, we might have a direction, and so we're actually better suited, and this is the parable's point, to adopt the stance of the hound, who finds their way through the brush or around a mountain or what have you by using their scent. So following the scents and using their nose and quickly pivoting when things change. That is a better mental model to use when we're thinking about our career, and I think that pairs perfectly with thinking about a match quality. So match quality is your ability to pick up the scent of what interests you, and then the sample period is really allowing yourself that moment of pivoting that allows you to catch the scent and to follow it into deeper and deeper experience. So with that, I'll end up this video, or I'll wrap up this video. I hope that you found it was useful. I hope that you will consider buying a copy of Range. It is a fantastic book. Not the quick read, almost 300 pages, but it is both entertaining and enlightening. So I hope that you'll grab a copy. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this little break from talking about productivity tools. So if you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments and I can do more, because I have plenty of books that I can share. So thank you again for watching.